A lot of us assumed in November we would once again choose between Joe Biden and Donald Trump for the U.S. presidency. However, as of Sunday, July 21st, President Biden has stepped out of the race and has endorsed his Vice President, Kamala Harris, to be the Democratic candidate. Her candidacy will not be confirmed until the Democratic National Convention in August. However, the Democratic Party already seems to be solidifying support behind VP Harris. When we compare these candidates going forward, VP Harris will rely on President Biden's record as president to highlight her party's accomplishments. Lucky for us, how well both men performed as president is a matter of public record. This video is the first of a series comparing the performance of Presidents Biden and Trump during their time in office. The economic performance of our country is a key factor when comparing these two presidents. Gross domestic product, or GDP, is ideal for measuring our overall economic performance because it represents the total value of goods and services produced by a nation during a specific time period. For our comparison, we will use real GDP. Real GDP is GDP adjusted for inflation. Economists switch between GDP and real GDP depending on their analysis objectives. In general, GDP is used for short-term analysis and real GDP is used for long-term analysis. Since we are comparing economic performance for both Trump and Biden over a period of more than 7 years, real GDP is a better metric. Here's why. The plot above compares GDP and real GDP by quarter for the Trump and Biden administrations. The line in red is GDP and the line in green is real GDP. Notice the difference between GDP and real GDP at the end of 2023. During Biden's 3 years in office, our GDP increased from $22 trillion to $27.9 trillion. This represents a 23.6% growth in our economy, or roughly 7.9% per year. During that same period, real GDP increases from $20.7 trillion to $22.7 trillion. This represents an 8% growth to the economy, or roughly 2.7% per year. During Trump's first 3 years, the GDP grew from $19.3 trillion to $21.9 trillion. This is approximately 13.6% growth, or roughly 4.5% per year. During that same time period, real GDP increased from $19.4 trillion to $21.0 trillion. That is, wait for it, 8% growth, or roughly 2.7% per year. The real GDP growth rate during the first 3 years under Trump and under Biden was exactly the same. This shows why inflation must be considered when discussing growth in our economy. Regarding our COVID response, the mainstream media gives Biden credit for our pandemic recovery, but the data does not support this claim. At the end of 2019, before the pandemic started, our real GDP was $20,951 billion, or approximately $21 trillion. By second quarter 2020, real GDP dropped to $19 trillion. This represents a 10% contraction of our economy. However, by the end of 2020, just before President Trump left office, real GDP reached $20.7 trillion. This means that 88% of the losses to our economy caused by the pandemic were recovered before Trump left office. Both presidents should share credit for our recovery. That said, our response to COVID was complicated and mostly controlled by the state governments. I will make more videos looking at our nation's COVID response, focusing on how each state handled the sick and unemployed. But since the job market was directly impacted by our COVID response, the next video will focus on unemployment. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more.